Welcome to Crossroads. Plans to dim the sun are actually now back on the table, even in the mainstream media, and they're proposing this as a way to fight climate change. What better way to cool the earth than to just block the sun? Also, meanwhile, the House Intel chief is warning that foreign actors are working with people right here in the United States on information operations to sow discord among Americans. And we might have just seen this with X and all the locations of those mysterious accounts being revealed, which we'll get into. And on another topic, President Donald Trump recently ended the policies protecting Somali migrants from being deported, meaning they can all be deported now. And part of this was due to allegations they've actually been committing massive, large-scale fraud, especially by registering their children as being autistic when apparently they're not. And now more details are emerging on all of this. I'll be talking about these topics a lot more today, so hit the like button. Let's get started. Now, look, first off, it seems yesterday's conspiracies are today's realities. And the plan to dim the sun, well, you can add that to the list of things once regarded as conspiracy that we can now see are true. People actually want to do it. The practice known as solar geoengineering, which has been discussed with even experimented by, as a matter of fact, as a way to fight alleged climate change, well, it's back on the table. We thought it was gone. We thought they'd abandoned it. They're bringing it back. Politico said this. For decades, scientists had theorized that lacing the atmosphere with a cloak of dust could temporarily reduce global warming. And briefly on that, what they're trying to do is replicate the effects of a massive volcanic explosion where a volcano erupts and just spews ash into this, stratosphere, and it prevents light from reaching the earth. And historically, when that happens, humans have famine and freezing and crop failures and of course, diseases and just mass death. But they think they can do that to fight climate change because they say, well, famine and again disease and so on, it's better than the apocalypse. That's basically the argument for it, because they still believe in the climate narrative. It says few, however, had actually advocated researching the practice. It's not quite true, a lot of them did, but they continue, and none could say how dangerously it might destabilize weather patterns, food supplies, or global politics. Many scientists still warn that it will take many years to know whether such technology would prove wise or disastrous. In other words, you gotta pass it to find out what's in it. You gotta do it to find out how many people die from it. It says the terms used to describe it: solar geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol injection. They basically fly planes high up into the sky and spray aerosols into the stratosphere to dim the sun. Or it says solar radiation management. Fancy way of saying reduce the sunlight. Sound deceptively anodyne. And it says to most people, the idea of blotting out the sun still induces derision and disgust, a kind of planetary body horror. Why would we ever feel that way? But they talk about one company in particular that's called Stardust. And it says if what Stardust was claiming on the Zoom with Pastor was true, to these individuals working on this company, then a key threshold had already been crossed. It said humanity had gained the power to turn down the sun, and barely anyone on the planet even knew. Unless you were watching Crossroads, because we've been talking about it. But it continues stating, what's more, that untested power was now effectively for sale. In a world of rising chaos, sci-fi pilled billionaires and nationalist leaders, a private company offering the means to control the world's temperature with almost no international law regarding the deployment of such technology was a disturbing prospect, thought Pastor, who then built a company to do it. But it says, but there was another consideration he couldn't ignore. What if it was the only option left? So in other words, they're basically saying that solar geoengineering, technologies to blot out the sun, it's a way to protect us all from the potential devastation of global warming. And yeah, you might create, the effect of mass famine and disease that you'd see during an apocalyptic volcanic explosion, but not the kind of mass death you would see in a world-ending scenario like they've been alleging that every 10 years climate change will lead to. And so now that they're working on this, they also say, hey, we can also make a lot of money with it. And guess what? While there are some countries that ban it, Mexico, for example, and some states that restrict it, like Florida, for example, it's not banned internationally. And so because of international law, you can kind of do it from a country that allows it, and who's going to stop you, and you can make a lot of money with it. Now, this also ties into the broader issue of geoengineering in general, which actually is being pushed as well. This could be, for example, artificially inducing rain. A lot of countries are doing it. In fact, Iran is now doing this because they're suffering from mass drought. But it includes also solar geoengineering, right? This geoengineering technology. The Atlantic just said this: for years, the idea of geoengineering, artificially lowering global temperatures through technological means, has been met with skepticism. And I would add to that, if you even reported on it, they would call you a conspiracy theorist, although they were doing it the entire time. And although, ironically, a lot of these same media that were calling people conspiracy theorists had even previously reported on it, but for some reason they didn't want to be talked about. But they say, only a handful of dedicated and much criticized scientists have argued for researching it at all. And when others weighed in, it was generally to trash the idea. It said this September, just recently, in a study published in the journal Frontiers in Science, more than 40 experts in climate change, polar geosciences, and ocean patterns warned that geoengineering was extremely unlikely to work and likely to have dangerous consequences, which, if you're watching Crossroads, we actually covered it at the time. Basically, scientific report comes out, and they say, look, don't artificially dim the sun. We know there are many companies trying to do it right now. There are governments experimenting on it. The United States under Biden even ordered research into it, although they argued they were not advocating for it. They were merely looking into the effects of it, meaning it was always there. But they were saying, basically, this report just a couple months ago, that if this were to be done, the consequences for the human world would be disastrous. It would be an artificial, natural disaster were they to try to blot out the sun. And if they were to do aerosol injection, it could last for years. Like, it would not be like a 2-day thing. It would stay there for a long time, and we would have detrimental effects for years. But they add to this: spraying reflective aerosols into the stratosphere, to deflect the sun's heat, for example. It could cause, they say, stratospheric heating, which may alter atmospheric circulation patterns, leading to wintertime warming over northern Eurasia, meaning it could actually cause heat to go up in some places rather than down. And they state, as the actual predictions for Earth's future have become more dire, scientists are starting to agree. More than 120 of them signed on to a response to the Frontiers paper that argued that more research into geoengineering was in fact urgently needed, meaning while it seemed that, basically a couple months ago it came out that, hey, maybe this is a bad idea. The argument now is, well, maybe we need to research it more, meaning that since then it kind of triggered additional interest in this issue. And, the real irony was that in Florida, when they recently banned geoengineering in general, including, stratospheric injection, and the media framed it as, Republicans fighting against, I think they called it some conspiracy thing, right? They were lying, of course. They knew there were reports on this. They knew that there were people funding it. They knew there were programs on it because a lot of them had reported it. And what's happening now in the world is that scientists are wanting to research this, and it has increased in interest rather than decreased because of that report. It continues stating, though, in theory, geoengineering could mean brightening marine clouds or reflecting sunlight back into space by mirroring light off polar ice. And it says the term has also been used to describe technology that removes carbon from the atmosphere. We've talked about it before on the show. Carbon capture facilities. They have many in the United States already, including in Arizona, I believe. They said, which is now widely accepted as a necessary tool to limit global warming. By the way, there's a big business around this. What companies do is they build these carbon capture or carbon reduction programs. They estimate how much carbon they prevented from going into the atmosphere or whatever, including even plans to cut down trees and bury trees, under the argument that were there to be a forest fire, a tree would burn, it would create X amount of carbon emissions. And so by cutting down and burying a tree in the ground, you're preventing a potential emission by preventing a tree from hypothetically in the future catching fire. Then they take those carbon credits representing the amount they believe they captured through whatever means they're arguing, and they sell it to big companies so companies can buy carbon credits to offset their carbon emissions and then reach what they call net zero. And so that's the way the business works. And then you get into these big investment firms that will only invest in companies if they're net zero. And the investment firms then do these weird businesses like carbon capture facilities and otherwise in order to basically make mass profit through an artificial market. That's the way the business of global warming works. There's a business around it. But it continues stating this. The most vexing technology is what's broadly referred to as solar radiation management. Again, one of the many names used for it, the other one being solar geoengineering, the other one just being blotting out the sun, which they say is reflecting aerosols that can prevent the sun's heat from reaching Earth. Meaning, of course, they're acknowledging, yes, this stuff is real. Yes, there are companies working on it. Yeah, it may cause, mass death and famine and disease, but maybe it's worth it. And from September till now and going forward, they're going to be researching it. A lot of these big outlets, they're talking about it right now because they're restarting the discussion on it. Meaning this has now gone from being conspiracy to mainstream discussion. Now, another topic here, though, the Department of Government Efficiency, that's DOGE with Elon Musk formerly, it's now officially being shuttered. And it's actually coming to an end several months before it was supposed to. Now, I'll be talking about what's happening with Doge after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. The Department of Government Efficiency, the DOGE department, it's now closing shop, and it's coming to an end several months before schedule. Now, is this an issue of it being under budget and ahead of schedule, or is it an issue of it kind of falling apart when Elon Musk left? I don't know. But it's being discussed right now. The Guardian says this: the Department of Government Efficiency has apparently been dissolved with 8 months still remaining on its contract, ending a drawn-out campaign of auditing federal agencies and firing thousands of federal workers. Or maybe the government shutdown did all the work for it. I don't know. But they continue stating this. They say that doesn't exist. Office of Personnel Management, OPM Director Scott Cooper, told Reuters earlier this month when asked about DOGE's status, adding that it was no longer a centralized entity. Now, I would add to this, Doge was created as a kind of special project, and it was also built upon an Obama-era thing that was meant to basically use technology to make the government more efficient. What Trump actually did is they took an Obama-era special order and reformatted that. And the role of it was basically to use technology to increase the efficiency of different government branches and to audit them and so on, to find where there were where efficiency was lacking. And they took it much further. Originally, it was like, hey, let's make you a better website. hey, let's make you a better social media presence. Hey, let's get you off of like using like an old school printer or laminating machine, and let's start using like PDF files and Excel sheets and so on. They were modernizing the government back in like 2008, and that was the context of the original office. The Trump administration took that and they said, well, let's use higher technology to basically audit different government branches. And DOGE basically worked as an advisory branch. They would work with the heads of different agencies saying, okay, you don't need this. You don't need this group of individuals. Hey, you have a bunch of workers who aren't even people. It's just ghost jobs and people are collecting money off it. These programs are completely unnecessary, not efficient. Let's get rid of bureaucracy. Let's get rid of fat. Let's get rid of the extra spending. And that's what they were getting rid of. Now, we didn't really hear much of it after Elon Musk left the agency, though. And of course, Elon Musk briefly did not seem very happy with Trump after he left, although I think it has since changed. And so there are some questions over, well, did DOGE finish its job? Or did it just kind of end preemptively, right? But back to this, it says the statement confirmed long-standing suspicion that DOGE, created by an executive order that President Donald Trump signed on his first day of his second term, was on its way out. It says the tech billionaire Elon Musk and the former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy were tapped to lead the effort and were expected to drive large-scale structural reform through July 24, 2026, which we're not at yet, meaning they could have still done it. Was it ended preemptively because, again, they left, or did they just finish their job early? That is the question. Now look, meanwhile, the House Intel chief is warning that foreign actors are actually working with people right here in the United States to sow discord among Americans, to divide us, to turn us against each other, to make us hate each other, to make us fight. And apparently this is a foreign information operation. Just the News said this. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford is pressing for major counterintelligence reforms across spy agencies, warning that foreign actors are conspiring with Americans to destabilize and divide the United States. What do you call this? Exactly what I've been calling it for the past, 15 years or so. This is a demoralization operation. There are foreign actors trying to destabilize the United States and demoralize the American people, to make you lose faith in the institutions, to make you lose faith in the ability of freedom to function, to make you lose faith in the integrity of the system, and to make you demand something entirely different, like totalitarian socialism, for example. And if you don't see that happening, look at young people right now and what's happening with them. Now, on this is what he said. He said, I think there was a whole network of both state and non-state actors, like maybe big billionaires, wink, wink, who could that be? And non-state actors that bring to bear here in the United States, that is to exploit any kind of political divide that might exist or schism that may exist, even within a political party, Crawford told Just the News in a wide-ranging interview. Now, briefly on that, part of the idea of an operation to sow discord, of what you would call a demoralization operation, is typically not to create a new movement. More often, it is to subvert an existing movement. So, for example, the anti-war protests of the 1960s against the Vietnam War. You could say a lot of it was grassroots, but the Soviet Union would infiltrate it and basically steer it in a more radical direction. Same thing with social movements right now in the United States. If there is discontent about a war, if there is discontent about a social issue, if there is discontent about, let's say, the affordability of houses or the affordability of medical care, there are foreign actors, domestic actors, and NGOs who will infiltrate those movements and try to subvert the trajectory. Think of it like judo or jujitsu. An opponent throws a punch, you take the punch and you redirect it and you throw them. You move with the momentum, in other words. You move with the momentum and you redirect the force. It's the exact same concept they're using with this. And so, while, for example, a movement against the high cost of homes might be, hey, let's remove red tape so we can build more homes. Wow, would that work? Or hey, let's make it so that big banks and investment firms can't buy up all the single family properties. What an idea. Or hey, maybe we should not bring in, tens of millions of people from the third world and then give them free homes or whatever. And if we do that, if you really want it, maybe we should build an additional number of homes to compensate for the additional population that you're flooding the country with. Those would be normal proposals based on free market principles of supply and demand. If there's a squeeze on the market, increase supply and the price goes down. It's a basic free market principle. But they're not doing that. The proposal instead is, hey, homes are too expensive. Let's use socialism to give everybody free houses, or let's kill the landlord or something like that, which is the CCP's stance on it from when they took over. The proposal instead is basically to create government power by manipulating a circumstance. So that's how these things typically work. But it continues by stating this. And the argument, of course, is saying, well, the existing institution, the existing system does not function. Therefore, the solution is to institute a new system, right? Continues stating this, so he says, so they kind of help sow discord. We've seen malign influence from state actors that include China, Russia, and Iran. But there's also the non-state actors that can be doing the bidding of a nation state. Many of them, of course, getting money from foreign actors or foreign people living in foreign countries and so on. And continues stating, for example, what if you had, let's say, Russia was essentially paying for cyber attacks against certain targets, or that China might be doing the same thing, Crawford said. He said China might be mobilizing the diaspora that lives here in the United States, maybe U.S. citizens, but they have this underlying allegiance to the mother country, and China seeks to exploit that. What he would be alluding to here is what I've also been reporting on since 2008, which is the United Front operations of the Chinese Communist Party. Operations to manipulate diaspora groups of the Chinese regime here in the United States, loyal to the CCP, many of whom have even traveled back and forth quite often, get money through the China side that cannot be audited, and then carry out influence operations within the United States. I've said it before and I'll say it again, the United Front is the greatest threat to the United States. Just in New York, some of the branches of the Tongs working through it openly have tens of thousands of members. And let that sink in. You have tens of thousands of Chinese spies in New York City alone. In New York City alone. But it continues stating this, within the New York area. It says, the growing collaboration of foreign malign influences and those on U.S. soil, Crawford said, makes pressing counterintelligence reforms an urgent matter of national security. He singled out FBI Director Kash Patel for doing a tremendous job within the intelligence community in advancing new thinking and structures, and implored other agencies to follow suit. Basically, what he's arguing is that we're being subverted. There are active measures, right? Russia would refer to these as active measures. The Chinese Communist Party would refer to these as United Front operations. Other countries do this too, so it's being done through even terrorist organizations. On this note, by the way, Donald Trump just yesterday also set in motion the designation of the Muslim Brotherhood, at least branches of it, as a terrorist organization, following in the footsteps now of Texas, which might have been aligned with it anyway. And so you have different organizations here that are acting in foreign interest with the intent of changing the nature of our country. And whether it's Russia or Iran or China or these crazy communist groups we have running on our streets on a manner of different issues. All of these things are acting towards similar purpose. They're trying to alter the structure of government of the United States, weaken us, subvert us, corrupt us, and make us into something that is easily taken over or altered into a different system, to destroy what we are and to create what they want us to be, namely either a destroyed state or a socialist dictatorship. Now, speaking of foreign actors sowing discord, though, guess what else happened? X, formerly known as Twitter, they rolled out a brand new feature, and it caused chaos, absolute chaos. People were deleting their entire accounts because they were getting ready for it. Uh-oh, something's coming. Some people have posted apologies. Some people have tried explaining themselves. Some people have just vanished into the ether. Because what happened? X just made it so that you can see the location of where an account is being run. So it turns out a lot of accounts that were posing as like MAGA, hey, make America great again. We need, a new nationalist movement. They're being run from like India or Bangladesh or like Qatar or Nigeria and stuff like that. Like it's either people trying to scam us because they're just making money on popular issues, or it's people trying to subvert us, meaning they're trying to like take advantage of these disputes and sow discord. It turns out also many accounts posing as Americans are being run from other countries. And this was a huge suspicion among a lot of influencers. Like, it seems there's a lot of weird fake accounts on X, and it seems a lot of these are trying to push things in kind of extreme directions. It turns out that suspicion was well founded, and there are massive amounts of fake accounts on X being run by people in other countries, masquerading as Americans. Fox, including some of the biggest, most influential ones. Fox News said this: the new feature allows all X users to inspect where a given account is based, usually listing a country or region. Since the update rolled out on Friday, many popular accounts posing as American patriots or constitutionalists have been exposed as being run from foreign countries. Notes one example of this, one of the accounts, 1776 General, boasts over 140,000 followers and has a user biography describing the owner as a constitutionalist, patriot, and ethnically American. So how many of you describe yourself in your bio as ethnically American? Right? I better tell them that I'm ethnically American so they know I'm American. If that sounds weird, it's because it is. It says the biography claims the account is based in the United States, but X's new feature reveals it is actually based in Turkey. Now, the owner of the account tried explaining himself. He said, I work in international business. I'm currently working in Turkey on a contract. The owner of the account posted after the new feature was released. Is that true or not? I don't know. You be the judge. And it's another account, America Voice, had over 200,000 followers before the update rolled out. The new feature exposed that it was being run from South Asia. What is South Asia? Well, either like Pakistan or India. It's basically India. It says the owner simply deleted the account. Uh-oh, they found me. Delete. It notes the phenomena is not limited to American politics, however. Many accounts claiming to have been reporting on alleged Israeli war crimes in Gaza also appear to be misleading users. It actually came out that a lot of the Stop Genocide in Gaza accounts were claiming to be American, and they were being run out of Qatar or different parts. Some were being run out of Palestine, actually, out of Gaza. And so, fair enough. If you're from those countries, just say you are. But the big issue here is they were misleading users. They made it appear that they were patriots, they were American influencers, and they were not. They were people from countries that maybe were manipulating American interests for their own interests. Interesting as well, actually the Epoch Times exposed a lot of this pretty early on, several months back. We actually found that New York Times was posting hit pieces against Shenyun Performing Arts. New York-based performing arts company gets death threats, bomb threats, rape threats all the time from Chinese foreign actors. This American dance company had all well over 10, I believe, hit pieces written by New York Times, one after the next. And we noticed a trend that there were all these weird accounts boosting it on X. And it turned out through our own research, there were literally thousands of fake accounts being run. They looked like Chinese, that were boosting the New York Times. New York Times had all these Chinese actors boosting their hit pieces. We actually reported it to X. X confirmed, and they deleted tons of them. So it turned out that some of these fake accounts were actually boosting the New York Times in their hit pieces trying to attack Falun Gong and Shenyun Performing Arts. Now, also, speaking of foreign operatives doing uncouth things, President Donald Trump recently ended the policies that protected Somali migrants from being deported And part of the reason he did this, as he said, it's allegations that Somalis, unfortunately, and Trump said this broadly, they've been committing massive, large-scale fraud in the United States. It doesn't mean they're all doing it, but Trump called them out on it and basically said this community, I mean, he said it kind of as a whole almost, but broadly speaking, has been just massively defrauding the United States. Just the News said this: federal prosecutors have uncovered multiple fraud schemes involving Somali migrants in Minnesota that have siphoned billions, with a B, billions in taxpayer money from food, welfare, and autism safety net programs, and even routed some to overseas terrorists. So they were scamming the American welfare system, using it for their own benefit, and then sending it to other countries to back up Somali terrorist organizations. It says the scandal uncovered by acting U.S. Attorney, this is Joe Thompson in Minneapolis, has handed Republicans a political cudgel heading into the 2026 election to bash liberals like Governor Tim Walz, who, he was the running mate of Kamala Harris in the 2024 elections. Tim Walz is the governor in the state this is taking place, for creating a welfare state with little or no safeguards, and now countless victims of fraud. They basically created just massive amounts of people registering for welfare, to the extent that the facilities where people would have to go to get their child analyzed. Hey, my child has autism. I need to go on government assistance. The child would fake it and they'd get government assistance. And it ended up being that they would, if one of the facilities turned them down, they just go to another one and they'd keep doing it. And this basically made it so the facilities just started just mass approving it. And it created a statewide just mass fraud program where they were defrauding Americans within the range of billions of dollars. It says the dragnet has already resulted in 77 indictments for fraud against a food welfare program called Feeding Our Future. Maybe they mean Somalia's future, as well as a medical professional who prosecutors alleged falsely diagnosed Somali children in order to steal $14 million from a federal autism assistance program. Basically, if you go to Minnesota and the Somali communities, the levels of autism reports are like 3 times the normal average. And so if you understand, there's a small community that basically has like 3 times the amount of cases of like an entire state. That's what's going on. They're being accused now of defrauding Americans, stealing from Americans billions of dollars. And Trump is now saying, well, the jig is up. Not only are we going to investigate it, but we're going to deport all of you. Trump now wants to have them all deported. And that's what's going on now. All right, so that said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into it. And by the way, this looks very bad on Ilhan Omar in Congress as well, because she's kind of becoming at the center of it on the political side, as is Governor Tim Walz, because again, they're like the main political figures of that area. They're facing a lot of criticism now because of it. SD731, you're saying, good morning all. Do these scientists, you're talking about the, how about we block the sun? Good morning, all. Do these scientists, quote unquote, not remember the margarine commercials from the 70s? It's not nice to fool Mother Nature as thunder crashes. Yeah, right? Does anybody remember when there was that private company that wanted to do advertisements on the moon? Like, do I sound old by saying this? Does anybody remember that? It was a big, I can't remember even the year. It was like the late 90s or something. For those of you who are younger and remember this, there was an advertising company that was being rolled out, and they had set up like a Batman, summoning beacon thing where you project things in the sky. But theirs was so powerful, it could project onto the moon. And they were going to be doing advertisements, paid advertisements on the moon. They were going to treat the moon like a billboard, and they were going to sell it. Would you like to have your company advertised on the moon today? And I believe they even had a contract, if I'm right. It was like some beer company. It was like the Green Horse or something. I don't remember all the details. But people were enraged. They were like, you can't do that. You're going to make it so we look up and try to enjoy looking at the moon and we see a stupid advertisement. Like, what's next? You're going to like blanket the sky with like, I don't know, some fake projection and make us all stare at some big fake advertisement. Like, you don't mess with nature. Don't mess with Mother Nature like that. What's wrong with you people? Yeah, so I'd agree with the SD731. Aside from that, look, it's one thing to take away like a pleasant sight. It's another thing to do something that could have detrimental effect on basic human life. If they wanted to mess with the sun, and this isn't even about like reducing carbon emissions, this is like reducing the amount of sunlight hitting the earth altogether. You could kill a lot of people. If you overestimated and you did a little too much, you could replicate what humankind has experienced in the past already with, again, massive volcanic explosions that spewed carbon ash into the atmosphere. That it led to like multiple years of, like dark ages. You're talking just mass famine, crop failures, freezing temperatures, people getting sick. Like, you would kill a huge number of people. And if people think, well, hey, it's for the greater good. For the greater good. You ever see that rail thing? Well, you can kill a few people, but it's to save this number of people. We're killing baby Hitler. And you know what? All you people creating climate change, maybe you're baby Hitler. Time to do something for the goodness of the world. This is the way they argue it. And so for these people, it's like, well, yeah, we might kill a lot of people, but the result will be better. It's the same argument communists use, and they want to carry out these mass genocides. We're doing it for the people. Which people? Like the third of the population you just sent to the gulag and murdered, or sent to the killing fields. Which people, right? Maybe those in power. I don't know, but that seems like a weird argument to me. California guy, you're saying, were there any significant changes made as a result of Doge, or was it only very surface changes? In my opinion, I think Doge actually did. Okay, this is my personal take, right? This is just my own analysis based on what I observed. I think Doge accomplished a couple things. I think Doge, first of all, raised public awareness over ridiculous government spending. And so what they did was they achieved the carrying out of audits of the Social Security systems and violations of it. They carried out audits of USAID and crazy government spending. Hey, why are we sending money to like this crazy program in another country to like study like gender of fish or something? It exposed, and Elon Musk talked about this, the kind of industry that was established where people, even within agencies, would themselves or have their families register a random NGO that didn't do anything provable, and the person in charge of grants would grant a grant to their own business, basically, or to a business of someone closely tied to them so they could profit off of it. Like to the range of like millions and millions of dollars, some much more than that actually. And so it exposed this. Doge created a type of rage, public outrage against government ridiculous spending. Doge also allowed it so that data from one agency could be transferred and used for another. So, for example, Social Security numbers being able to be compared with maybe registrations for social welfare. And what Doge had uncovered was that there were some people using the same Social Security number multiple times. Apparently there's no limit, you can use it in some instances. It also exposed the issue of illegal immigrants stealing the identities of Americans in order to illegally work or to register for social benefits, and even of people in other countries defrauding the United States through the Social Security system. where they're registering the social security number from other countries and then making phone calls nonstop. Like a huge percentage of the calls they had were fraudulent in order to defraud Americans. So Doge shut all that down and allowed agencies also to cross-examine data. For example, voting registration versus citizenship verification. That was made possible through Doge. For example, driver's license databases, social security numbers, and again, voting registration to see if people are like illegally registering to vote. Boom, that's a big deal. Auditing and even shutting down some agencies in different parts of the government and creating additional scrutiny. But I think the long-term impact of Doge within agencies was the establishment of tools to audit and tools to monitor and also tools of accountability. Now, to what extent will that be carried out in the future? Will there be ongoing scrutiny? Will there be ongoing, rooting out of these things? Look, it's just the reality is it'll probably go back and forth because that's the way human civilization has always been. Okay, it is always the case that something is instituted, and over time it becomes a bit more lax, and eventually people start violating it haphazardly, and then there's a recorrection or a collapse, and then it starts all over again. We saw it in Rome. You see it in every country on the face of the planet. And you know what? It's just throughout history as well. Like, if you can name me a single government in history that was able to not have problems of corruption at some point, tell me, because I can't think of any. Part of it is just the problem of human nature itself. And it's not to say that we should not try to stop it. My point is, you might fix something temporarily, but you will never fix something forever. And that's just the way the world works, unfortunately. You can't really fix things fully unless people want to fix themselves. And things tend to oscillate. It's just the reality of the world. But again, I would actually argue something else, and I'm not trying to toot my horn here, but this is why we have media. This is why we're supposed to have media. This is why journalism exists. A journalist is supposed to work as the eyes and ears of the public in order to ensure that things like this are not happening. Part of my job as a journalist and part of the job of the industry as a whole is to act as what they call the fourth estate. Why do they call journalism the fourth estate? We're not a branch of government, right? Because the government has 3 branches. They say journalism is the 4th branch, but journalism is not instituted through government. It is instituted as a type of watchdog among the American populace and then protected by the Constitution, right? The job of a journalist is basically to audit. If you want to like really break it down, the job of the journalist is to audit. The auditing takes the form of what we call reporting. What is reporting? Well, we go to the White House every day and we ask them questions. And in Epoch Times, we are at the White House every day, or almost every day, by the way. And we ask them questions and we look into the integrity of claims. Is it true? Is it false? Is there somewhere in between? We investigate where money is going. We investigate programs that the public is not being told about. This is why I packed my bags and went down to the Darien Gap a little over a year ago to investigate the migrant crisis and went deep into the jungle to go to the Embra Indian villages at the mouth of the Darien Gap. The reason I did that is because I was carrying out an audit, otherwise known as an act of reporting as a journalist. And I needed to go look for myself, see, ask questions, investigate, and then tell you all what I found. And so I actually do believe that an honest media does create the same type of investigative auditing that an office like Doge would create. And I think something like Doge would only really be necessary to the extent that, frankly, we don't have a lot of honest media left. And not only that, the honest media tend to be deeply censored. I'm still demonetized, right? If I was just on YouTube, I wouldn't be able to make a living, right? I would not be able to make a living doing this because they've made me unable to. And so, that's the nature of journalism, though, is people always try to shut down legitimate journalism because when you're doing legitimate journalism, you tend to expose things people don't want you talking about. That's the reality of the business, which is also why the founding fathers had to put literally in the Constitution the freedom of the press, right? That's why the freedom of the press is part of like the Bill of Rights. It's because there are people who desperately want to not have that. They don't want the freedom of the press. MK, you're saying, I wish people would just stop trying to be God. Wouldn't that be great? That'd be a great thing. Actually, if we look back in history, a lot of problems were caused by people trying to be God, Go to China today. So I reported on it during COVID. During COVID, the CCP, they shut down a lot of the churches and temples. You were not allowed to go and pray to God, but they were repurposing churches and temples as shrine worship for Mao Zedong and Xi Jinping. So you couldn't go pray to Jesus, but you could go pray to a golden idol of Mao Zedong, right? Not even joking. They have party worship in China, right? Because the Communist Party tries to destroy religion because they want to be God. They want to replace God. Historically, a lot of the most violent conquerors, the greatest tyrants, believed that they were also God on earth, carrying out the acts of God. Most communist dictatorships are established by people like that. They believe they're God. They believe they're higher than God. And you have a lot of these big billionaires trying to reorganize society right now because they're trying to play God as well, right? They don't trust the natural order, and they believe that they need to gerrymander the whole thing in order to make it look like what they want it to look like, which may or may not work and may cause more problems than anything we would have had otherwise. I think people trying to play God or believing they're God is a threat to humanity itself, actually. Seymour Butts, you're saying, I live in a small town, Columbus, Tennessee, population 80,000 plus. Good to know, Seymour. That's cool. And you say, lately I noticed a new breed of brown people around. Seymour, you're saying they seem to be more arrogant, just a little more pushy. Okay, look, I guess I'm a tint of orange, or my daughter says I'm more like a red man. I'm mostly white, but I've noticed this too. I've noticed the newer generation of illegal immigrants and migrants are way different from the previous ones. They are way different. They're way more entitled. They're way more arrogant. They're jerks. In New York City, like a lot of the delivery drivers are illegal aliens. They blow through red lights. Like if you're walking on the sidewalk, they just it's crazy. They ride on the sidewalk. They weave around you. The ones you see, like the gang member types around like Times Square, they're hostile, like they're mean. And it's way different from the way they used to be. And you're continuing here. You said, it makes me wonder if there's a second you said previously Mexicans here seem to be very good family people. That's my impression also. Like I've worked in industries where used to have a lot of Mexican illegal workers, okay? I used to work in the restaurant industry, and a lot of the restaurant industry was and still is illegal immigrants from Mexico. I used to work in the construction industry. A lot of the construction industry is illegal aliens from Mexico. And the way they used to be was very humble. Catholic people, family men, hard workers. They were very humble. Some of the most humble, good-hearted people I knew were those types. And they wanted work, and they were very kind about it. Please, senor, give me some work. I'll do anything. And they were that's basically how the relation was. It's totally changed now. You try and hire them they're like, I need $25 an hour minimum. They'll even call, I know guys this happened to. They'll call, if you hire one, they'll call you and they'll blackmail you. They'll say, hey, me and your other workers are not going to show up tomorrow unless you give us all a $5 raise. Enjoy running your business with no workers because we have a monopoly. And so they've been doing that kind of stuff now. It's really wild. But you continue saying, That makes me wonder if there's a second migration from large cities to small towns as illegals try to evade ICE. That's very interesting. Which in order to meet quotas must first hit the larger population centers. You know, see, Mark, that's very interesting. I mean, it would make sense, you know, if you have ICE going into Los Angeles and they're like, hey, time to go home, everybody. Time to go home, ding, ding. You know, what are you going to do, right? Well, if you're an illegal alien, you're probably going to move in with your cousin who lives in a small town somewhere else to avoid the deportation patrols. I mean, it would be the smart thing to do. So that would actually make sense. Now, I can't verify this. Seymour, I trust you. I know you're solid. You know, we've been here long enough. So, but that's super interesting, actually. Did you see this only start? I'm curious if you saw this only really start after like the big ICE raid started. Like, is this like within the past few months thing, or like the past 6 months thing? That'd be very interesting, actually. And it actually has me wondering if we could figure out if this is happening in other areas too. I assume they'll avoid Martha's Vineyard because we saw what happened last time. Okay, briefly, those of you who don't get my joke, when Biden was president, and they were telling like Florida and Texas, look, why are you so mean to these illegal immigrants? You know, you're being so mean to them. And Texas and Florida said, well, if you like them so much, we're going to put them on buses and send them to where you are. And they started busing them to like New York City and Washington, D.C. And they sent like 2 busloads or 3 busloads to Martha's Vineyard, where Obama's home is, and so on. And they literally called in the military to deport them, or to send them to like other states, to give them free flights elsewhere. Like, it only took like a couple busloads for them to do that. It was crazy. Anyways, maybe that's happening. E. Frago, you're saying what's the CCP's actual population? You know, they say it's like 1.4 billion, I believe, but I've seen a lot of analysis suggesting they've been lying about it. And because, you know, this is the problem with the CCP. Even aside from the issue, Chinese Communist Party suppresses information. So okay, look, let's say as a journalist, I were to go and try to audit there, right? I'm carrying out my job as a reporter. If I were to go to the countryside in China and try to carry out an investigation, I would have a CCP, special agent force following me, monitoring me, questioning me, and harassing me. There's a lot of people who've experienced this. One of the big ones, I know there's a guy online, I believe it's Lao Y86. He used to do these like motorcycle tours around China, and he experienced a lot of this type of harassment. I've watched some of the videos on it. It happens. If you start showing things they don't want to be seen, you get massively harassed. You know, a lot of journalists with the mainstream media are like, well, how do you report on China from not being in China? I'll counter that by saying, well, how do you report on China from being in China when if you report the truth, they kick you out of the country? How do you report on China being in China if you're not allowed to do your job? How do you report on China being in China that if you were to carry out an investigation, they might even like arrest you and throw you in the gulag or something else? How do you do that? The simple answer is you don't. You just work as a little puppet parrot who just repeats everything that's told to say. That's all it is. There's a big game at play, and a lot of dishonesty. But so when it comes to the CCP, there's a lot of prevention of investigation, right? They restrict the press. In China, there is no such thing as a free press. It is all deeply controlled. The media is controlled. Social media is controlled. Everything is controlled. Nothing is said, nothing is heard unless the CCP says so. And if you try to do it outside their realm, well, they're going to cancel your bank account through the social credit system, and they're going to make you homeless. It's a big problem they've been having. The other thing when it comes to population in China, though, is this. They've had the one child policy for a long time. We still to this day don't know how many people died from COVID. You have these ghost cities, not the ones they built is like, they just overbuilt. But ghost cities, like places that used to be deeply populated and are like empty now, right? People have posted a lot of videos, these weird places that used to be full of people that are like empty. So in China, you have this stuff, right? You have all of these problems, the lack of people wanting to have kids, because it's just become cultural now because of the one-child policy. When the CCP says they want to increase the number of children, what happens? When there's a government policy, the way communism has always worked, is the local officials want to look good. So what do? They carry out fake investigations, or they never do the work, and then they lie about it. Well, comrade, good news. We have record crop harvest this year, when in reality they had like a famine and people are starving to death. Good job, comrade. Here's a bonus for you. You're a true good communist. He says, yes, I am, comrade. Half my population's dead, but it's for the greater good, right? And so they do that. There's a falsification of data that takes place because they want to make themselves look good. So they'll over-report on what would be the demand of the party. And so you have a lot of fake data. You have fake economic data, you have fake demographic data, you have fake factory data, fake production data, fake everything. And, the real irony of this is that when it reaches guys like Xi Jinping, sitting in Zhongnanhai, a lot of times they even make bad, when they do make policies, which are going to be bad anyways, they do it using data that even they don't know. Like even they don't fully know the situation of the country because of this like institutionalized corruption through the incentivized falsification of data. It's crazy. Another reason why you should have a free press, by the way, right? Another reason why having freedom of the press is beneficial, because if you have let's put it this way, if there was a mass famine in America, I'd probably report on it. I'd be boots on the ground talking about it, which I've actually been doing some stuff like this lately. You'd hear about it because you'd have guys like me going out and doing it, because that's what you all hire me to do, as far as I'm concerned, right? In my eyes, I work for all of you. Journalism is an institution funded by the American people to investigate and then tell them what we found. That is the purpose. That's the reason you hire guys like me. By subscribing, by the way, so thank you. Judy Akeem, you're saying, journalist sounds much better than social auditor. It does, right? Maybe not these days. Journalist in America is kind of like a bad word, but hopefully we can change that. You're saying, but yes, it should technically be an audit. Well, and that's kind of how I see it, right? A lot of journalists would say you're holding the powers to account. And I don't like saying that because it sounds too like social justice-y and like advocacy journalism. The reality is this. Everybody wants to know what's happening in the world. Part of having a free society, especially if you vote, and especially if you want to know if there's any pending dangers or market information that might benefit you or harm you, you want to know about it. The problem you have is that the powers that be, the systems, typically don't want to tell you things that are not in their interest to tell you. So if it's not in their interest to tell you something, they're going to lie about it, right? It's like, oh, a major corporation has a problem. I'm sure they'll tell me about it. No, they're not unless you force them to. Oh, this guy is not being honest about the success of this program. Hey, Comrade Stalin just seized all the seeds and created a famine. Hope he tells us about it. No, turns out he won't. Guess I'll die then. Like that kind of stuff. You kind of want to know about it, right? And so, basically, in order for all of you to know this, you would be capable of it. But you would need to travel constantly. You would need to read government reports constantly. You would need to go to the White House and sit in the press briefings, or go to the DOD, the Pentagon, and sit in the briefings and ask them questions. You need to make phone calls. You need to go through financial documents. You would need to carry out more work and investigation than a human would be capable of in a single day, right? And so that's why we have media. A media organization basically does this. We have people who go to the White House. We have people go to the Pentagon. We have people who travel to other countries. We had Roman Belmakov with Facts Matter going and investigating, in Sri Lanka and in, the Netherlands, investigating like the anti-farm policies and the anti-fertilizer policies and the eating the bug things. You know what I mean? You had reporters doing investigations all over the country constantly. And then you have guys like myself. I in addition to this show, I'm also senior investigative reporter at Epoch Times, who kind of work as one of the places where a lot of the information is consolidated. I know what this person is finding, this person is looking into, and what was discovered here. And I kind of have a big eyes on the ground view of things because I'm part of a news agency. And I have colleagues who I talk to who say, hey, Josh, I found this. Hey, Josh, we found this in this report. This is a big deal. And, this is also why you have conversations among editors. And the editors send their reporters out all over the place, investigate this, report on this, take photos of this, ask this question. And this is how we work. And so as an entity, what does that mean? It means that we're working to do what you would never be able to do yourself. And we're gathering information with the intent of consolidating it, deciphering it, and deciding what is most useful to you as the user, as the viewer, as the reader, right? That's actually how media is supposed to work. I don't think a lot of them do it these days. It's how media is supposed to work. And I think that's also the difference between like true journalism versus advocacy journalism, because advocacy journalism is where just like a corporation or an individual who does not want to tell you something because it's against their interest, an advocacy journalist would also not want to tell you something also because it's against their interest. They're pushing special interest of a certain brand, right? Or at the very least, disclose it, right? You're supposed to disclose conflicts of interest, right? And so that's the way journalism, in my opinion, is supposed to function, and why we have it, and why I believe you're all here watching this. Because, aside from having fun conversations, I hope, which I enjoy with all of you, people want to have an accurate understanding of the world. You want to know what's going on in the world, and it helps you make other decisions in your life. That is the nature of it. All right, everyone, that said, join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Yeah, tomorrow is Wednesday. My sense of time is terrible. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, please do not forget to subscribe, like this video, share it if you want to. It does help us. And I'll see you again. In the meantime, thank you so much for being here. And as always, please take care of yourself, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.